Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Diner Days. This is Governor Jeff Landry, and as you know, we've been doing these Diner Days around the state, going to diners, having special guests. Today, we're at the Pennington Biomedical Research Facility, and we've got some unbelievably special guests. One of them is a star in the Trump administration, and that's Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Secretary of Human Health. And we really do appreciate you being here in Louisiana today, Mr. Secretary. We also have Senator Patrick McMath, who's the chairman of the Senate Health and Welfare Committee. We just finished signing one of his bills based upon Secretary Kennedy's great Make America Healthy Again policies. And that's what we did. We signed the big MAHA policy. What did you think about it?
I thought, when you signed today, the SNAP waiver, we've signed them now with probably close to a dozen states. But yours was the most sweeping one of all because it included junk food. So it's soda and junk food. Soda is 10% of the food stamps. I was going to tell you this story earlier. Brooke Rollins, who's the USDA Secretary, Department of Agriculture, she told me the soda people all came in. I'm sure you saw a lot of this too. They all came into her and they said, they were mad because it's a huge part of their revenues. And they said to her, she said, well, we just want nutrition for the kids. And they said, the food stamp program is not about nutrition. And she said it's called the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. There's nothing nutritious in your product. And as I said in my talk today, if you want to drink a soda, you ought to be able to. You live in the United States, you should have choice. But the federal government and the U.S. taxpayer should not be paying for it. Paying for soda for the poorest Americans, and we're going to pay up front for the soda, and then we're going to pay for the diabetes later.
Yeah, I can tell you, Secretary Kennedy, you're exactly right. It's the thing that drove me crazy. When I was growing up, you got a Coke or a soda water after you did something extremely special, and it was every once in a while, right? Like there might have been 6 of them in the pantry, and it had to last all month long. But you're right. Like you should be able to buy anything you want to buy with your money, but taxpayers shouldn't be footing the bill to basically create unhealthy Americans and then have to foot the bill to then cure those unhealthy Americans. And that's what we so appreciate about the policies that you've been putting out there. Let me ask you this: what's been the funnest part of your job?
The least fun part is the Senate hearings and their pressure. But everything about, this, coming here was the most fun part of my job. I don't want to insult you guys, Senator McMath, but Louisiana is not looked upon by the rest of the nation as a mecca of enlightenment. I thought the luncheon I had with you today, with your advisors and with the physicians and scientists here at Pennington, and that you were part of your core of advisors, was literally the most enlightened talk that I've had in 2 years. Running for president, running in President Trump's campaign, and then being at HHS. Like everybody in that room understood what's really happening. And it was really refreshing, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And then the Cajun food was exceptional.
Well, that's what normally lures everybody into Louisiana is the Cajun food. Look, I can tell you, we really do have some great things going on in Louisiana, and we can appreciate that reputation from around the country, because when you look at Louisiana statistically, we're 49th in a lot of healthcare metrics. But that's why you're here. That's why Senator McMath did what he did. That's why we signed the waiver asking Brooke to grant us a waiver on the SNAP program. Why? Because we want to increase the health of our population. We know our population is not healthy. We've accepted that. Now we want to do something about it, and that's why we appreciate you being here.
And I love also, I think it was Senator McMath's bill about continuing medical education, that you have to have nutrition in there. One of the MAHA initiatives that we have been promoting across the country, we've been promoting a lot of stuff, the SNAP waivers, good food in schools, good food in prisons, but also requiring medical schools in the state to make nutrition part of their curriculum. A lot of medical schools don't have a nutrition course, and the ones that they do have are really not good. Right? And this institute, Pennington, has been the leading institute in the country on nutrition, on food and health. And one of the things we're going to do at NIH is to really give a carrot and stick to medical schools across the country, saying you got to put in your first year curriculum, you got to put a really good, robust nutrition course. And, to see that you're doing that with the continuing medical education is really encouraging. Another thing is getting rid of the cell phones in schools.
Oh yeah, we did.
We did that. We did that.
That was a great one. That was one in which moms all called and said thank you, and then my nieces and nephews called and say, Uncle Jeff, what are you doing? Right? So you'd be fine.
I want to hear you about the continuing. But I went into these schools in Virginia and had banned the cell phones bell to bell. You got to leave them in your backpack. If your mom wants you, the principal will come and tell you, and then you can talk to her. But I walked into the auditorium where they're all eating and the kids are all talking to each other. They're having conversations rather than, all looking down in their lap the entire time, and with people lonely and, disassociated, disconnected, alienated. We have a malaise in this country. We have a crisis in mental health. And it's all to do with the disconnection. And the cell phone and these devices, it amplifies that disconnection from other human beings. And then the students, when I ask the students, how many of you like this, they all raise their hands. So they get used to it.
And then they love it. Yes.
Like fighting. The parents said it's great because now the kid doesn't use a cell phone in the car anymore.
And the teachers, we've heard from teachers. Teachers love it.
Teachers love it. The grades go up,
right?
Spike immediately, and then they come home and they can talk to their family on the dinner table and all of this other. So it gets them used to living without these devices.
Yeah, they act human. So my wife and I, we've got 4 young kids, and about 2 years ago, we purchased a little place in the country in Folsom. And the rule was when we go out there, all the iPads, get put away and you got to be a kid for a couple of days. And we very quickly realized they become human again and they interact with their brothers and sisters and their friends to the point where we pulled them away all together from when we get home. And it's these little things, like it's, instead of donuts in the morning, it's scrambled eggs. And you notice the difference that effect that can have on your kids, on our kids, just throughout the day. When they come home, they're in better moods. They've had more productive days. And that's another, piece to this whole MAHA puzzle is it really does matter what we're putting into our bodies. And so I think we made some really great steps today in progress in Louisiana becoming a leader, not just in the quality and taste of our food, but the nutritional programs that we have now.
And interesting when I was thinking about the CLE component that you placed into the bill and Secretary Kennedy talking about it, not only is the Pennington Biomedical Center a leading research facility in the nation on chronic diseases, but right now at Tulane, the Gold Ring Institute has basically entered a culinary portion into Tulane's medical program as well.
Perfect. Yeah, culinary medicine.
Yeah, doing culinary medicine. It was part of what I spoke about when I opened the session and introduced the MAHA bill at the beginning of this session. And, of course, here today we're getting ready to sign it. So there really are a lot of great things going on in Louisiana. And we appreciate you being here, and we appreciate you educating our population onto why it's so important to eat healthy and what a difference it makes in the lives. And of course, again, one of the frustrating things is when you think about chronic illnesses. I mean, one of the great positions you have in as the Secretary of Health and Human Services is that you have an opportunity to see the ability to basically cure a lot of people from those chronic diseases. And I think one of them is tying the SNAP benefits and what people eat to the cause of the chronic illnesses that have been prevalent not only in Louisiana, but around the country as well. I don't know if you want to.
I mean, I talked a little bit in my talk today about China. 20 years ago, there was no diabetes in China. It was basically unknown there. Today, 51% of the adult population is pre-diabetic or diabetic. And it's because they built 20,000 fast food restaurants and they began importing American processed food. When my uncle was president, we had 0 diabetes. We had, a typical pediatrician would see 1 case of juvenile diabetes over a 40 or 50-year career. Today, 1 out of every 3 kids who walks through his office door is diabetic or pre-diabetic. 38% of teens. And we know it's coming from, you can cure it with diet.
Right.
Most people can lose their diagnosis with diet. I was peripherally involved with tobacco cases back in the late 1980s. And during that time, the tobacco industry was the richest industry, cash richest industry in the world. And they had more cash on hand than any other industry. And they saw the writing on the wall. They saw the regulatory headwinds. They saw that they were facing litigation. Their consumer base was declining. And they began to diversify. And they diversified by investing in food companies. They bought all the food companies. By 1995, the 2 biggest food companies in the world were R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris. And they moved thousands of scientists who were engaged in making tobacco more addictive, more attractive to children. And they moved them to the food sector. And they developed ways of making chemicals in food that mimicked real food, so that have the flavor and aromas of strawberries, but they're chemicals made in a lab. Your body smells that strawberry, that small strawberry aroma. They want it, it craves it, but it eats it, and then your stomach is like, hey, nothing's happening there. There's, this is a food-like substance. It's not food. There's no nutrients in it. Well, it craves more and more, and you eat more and more. And they figured out all of these, they figured out ways to hijack your brain. One of the things they figured out is that your brain tells your stomach that it's full by counting the number of bites that times that you chew. So they began using food softeners to reduce the time, the amount of times you chew. And you can inhale a Twinkie without even, doing it. And you keep stuffing them down your pie hole because your stomach is saying
Just give me more.
There's nothing happening here. And you just get fatter and fatter, and you get diabetic.
Well, let me ask you this. What is it that actually got you first interested in these topics?
Well, it was a couple of things. I was an environmental attorney, and I did a lot of work here on the Atchafalaya and down on the coast, with the fishing groups. I was protecting clean water, and a group of moms, I was suing coal-burning power plants because there was, in 2003, the National Academy of Sciences and FDA did a report that showed there were dangerous levels of mercury in every freshwater fish in America. We were suing them, and I had 40 lawsuits at one point against coal-burning power plants, which were the sources of a lot of that mercury, and cement kilns. And these moms kept coming up to me in all of my speeches. They showed up, and they'd sit in the front row, and then afterward they'd talk to me. And those moms were the mothers of children with intellectual disabilities who believe that their children have been injured by vaccines. And one of them came to my house in Hyannisport in the summer of 2005. She was a psychologist from Minnesota, and she had a son who had gotten autism from a vaccine and won the case in the vaccine court. And she didn't want it. She won $20 million from the vaccine court, and she didn't want it to happen to other kids. So she brought me a pile of studies about 18 inches thick, and she put them on my front porch, rang the doorbell. And when I came to the door, she said, I want you. She introduced herself, and she said, I brought these studies. I'm not leaving till you read them. And I started reading those studies. And before I was, a third of the way down, I understood there was this giant delta between what the public health establishment was telling us and what the scientific reality was. And that kind of sucked me down a wormhole. And also, Governor, I had 11 brothers and sisters, and I had about 70 first cousins. And I know what a healthy kid looks like. And I didn't know anybody with a peanut allergy. I didn't know anybody with autism. I didn't know anybody with ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, Tourette's, all these things are common now. Diabetes. I didn't know anybody with diabetes. I didn't know anybody with rheumatoid arthritis. And now they're in every classroom. You walk through an airport and you see all these kids with the inflammation. You can see it on them, and with mitochondrial disorders. And I was saying something is making all these kids sick. Why isn't anybody talking about it? No, this is like the biggest crisis we have. The whole reason we live is for our children. And, they're getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And that kind of, it gave me kind of the energy and passion to put up with a lot. It's the kind of stuff that we have to put up with when you start talking about it.
Oh, yeah. No. Once you start lifting the veil, the knives come out. We all know that. We've seen it. I would remind Louisianans that you were one of the first people to come down and help us during the COVID-19 pandemic and to push back against the restrictions and actually to talk about what was going on and some of the harmful effects of the things that government was putting in place. Senator McMath basically, I would say, utilized the things that the policies that you laid out to write your bill. Wouldn't you say that, Patrick?
100%.
Right. And so that means that the things that you're doing, inspiring legislators like Senator McMath and others around the country. Why don't we talk briefly about how important it is for states to continue this movement?
Yeah, one of the things that's been really interesting and really gratifying at HHS is how the industry is coming to us and saying, we want to change, and saying it sincerely. These are people who wanted to change a long time ago, but they couldn't justify change their shareholders. Because if you're, putting dyes in Fruit Loops in our country, but not in Canada, and you're making a lot of money on the Fruit Loops from that formula, because the dyes are the petroleum synthetic dyes are cheaper than the vegetable dyes. And it's hard to go to your shareholders and your board and say, I want to change things for the good of the public. They wanted to change things. And now, because the states are enacting these legislations, they're terrified of a patchwork of different markets with different rules. And so every time one of these states, like Louisiana, pass these rules, they come to me and say, we want to change this, give us, what you want, tell us what you want, we're going to do it. And, we've had Kraft this week, the biggest food company, announce it was getting rid of all the dyes. Cargill is getting rid of all of its dyes. Tyson has already gotten rid of all of its dyes. And all of these companies, Steak and Shake is getting rid of seed oils. All of these companies are now coming voluntary to the table because they can now justify it to their shareholders because of what's happening on the states.
I got to tell you. So when we were in these discussions very early on, and the big food companies and Coca-Cola and Pepsi were coming and they were complaining about how we can't do this because Texas is doing that or Mississippi's doing this. And I got to say, well, guys, that's kind of the point. We want to cause as much chaos so you can go up to DC and go figure this out on the federal side. So.
Well, I can tell you, first of all, I want to thank you again for being here in Louisiana. I want to thank our great Senate chairman for bringing this bill forward. It was a great day in signing it. I can't tell you how much many Louisianians out there, thank you for helping us get on a more healthier path. We appreciate you coming down. We hope you come down more. I know that
feed me Cajun food. I'll come down as much.
Well, the one thing we won't run out of in Louisiana is Cajun food. And so as we wrap this edition of Diner Days up, we want everybody to know, remember, the 4th of July is this week. And it's a great holiday to remind us of the great values that inspire America: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And this is exactly what we're talking about. We want people to be healthy so that they can enjoy the greatness of America. Secretary Kennedy, we certainly do appreciate you coming to Louisiana. Thank you for being here, and we look forward to working with you throughout this administration and for a long time here in Louisiana.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.